Hello everyone. I, Varun Agarwal, welcome you all to this virtual roundtable discussion organized by ETCIO in partnership with Intel and Pi Data Center. Today's topic of the discussion is why you should not delay your journey to the cloud. Now, as you're aware, enterprises around the world are exploring new ways to enhance savings on IT expenditures and improve agility and productivity. By 2023, in fact, 55% of Indian organizations will have multi-cloud management strategy, which includes integrated tools across public and private clouds. A secure, scalable, and resilient hybrid cloud platform can reduce the risk of interruptions in business operations and security breaches. So today, the cloud is crucial in innumerable businesses, not only because it provides them with improved levels of computing, scalability, and security, but it also helps businesses in staying compliant with data localization policies. The ongoing COVID-19 situation has further exposed the need for rapid cloud adoption by enterprises in India. So in today's discussion, we'll have gentlemen from Intel and Pi Data Center together to discuss the benefits to businesses across the country that comes along with hybrid cloud strategy. So let me just introduce the panel for the day. Our first speaker of the day is Kalyan Muppaneni, who's the founder and CEO for Pi Data Center. Welcome, Kalyan.
Thank you, Varun. Looking forward.
Thanks. Our second speaker of the day is Saumer Phukan, who's the Director Sales India Key Accounts at Intel. Welcome, Saumer.
Thanks, Varun. Good afternoon, everyone. And as Kalyan said, looking forward to an engaging discussion.
So before we actually get into the discussion, let me just make a quick announcement. We'll be taking questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat window. We'll take up the questions post the panel discussion. So with that, let me just begin with Saumer. Saumer, I recently read a stat that cloud service providers are the center of tech industry value creation, and more than half of the industry value is generated by just top 25 tech companies. So what are the trends that Intel has observed globally when we talk about the cloud space? And how is it really similar or different for India-based cloud service providers?
So Varun, interesting that you put up 55% because depending on which day of the, which day you are on, probably the statistics is going further upward and upward. Okay. So let's talk about a few trends. If you look at from an overall perspective, right? The first part, of course, as you correctly said, the growth of cloud across the world, okay, is expanding rapidly. Couple of statistics there, okay. So we just did a study along with Dell and VMware, led by a group called Enterprise Strategy Group. We found that actually the number of enterprises were moved from a regular on-prem, what have you, to a cloud-based infrastructure that has more than tripled. It was about 17% in 2011. It's about 58% now. That's kind of number one. Same thing in India. Okay, depending on what kind of studies you see, the market is probably about 18 billion. 40% probably public cloud-based conversation, probably more, the rest more the hybrid or internal cloud-based or private cloud-based organizations, right? So the first order trend is actually more about the growth of the cloud, right? The second order thing is as people work remote, if you look at some of the usages being talked about, right, whether it's about VDI or remote learning, the architectures are beginning to change, Most of it today, if you really talk about cloud, it was always, there is a on-prem client or device, and then there's a backend data center somewhere remotely located. It's moving away from that to more of a distributed infrastructure and edge-based infrastructure. That's kind of a second thing you see, okay? And the third thing, of course, is as you move from a distributed to an edge, increasingly you'll see a convergence between, what kind of services that the cloud service provider offer, or what kind of services you can get from a communication service provider. I mean, for people who are following, if there's an organization called Rakuten in Germany, in Japan, right? If you look at what Rakuten is doing, it is actually traditionally a mobile services company offering mobile services, but completely a cloud-based infrastructure. So think about it this way that, hey, there's a growth, there's a change of architecture, and there's a convergence between cloud and comms. And the advantage India has in some of those is the fact that because we don't have so much of legacy infrastructure in most of the cases, there's probably an opportunity for us to be able to accelerate and adopt this faster than some of the other regions.
Excellent. In fact, Kalyan is the testimony of some of those innovations. Kalyan, given that you have a large presence in India, can you talk about what differentiation are you trying to add? It's a highly competitive field right now. We have a large number of players in the industry. So how are you really differentiating yourself?
Today, Pi is known for its, I mean, since you asked for a differentiation, I'll start with that and explain a little bit more. So today, Pi is known for quality in the industry, especially when it comes to cloud and data center services. Especially when it comes to cloud, right? From our perspective, the key pillars that we think is one is quality, scale, being able to scale at will and very, very quickly. And the third is obviously optimizing the overall cost, the total cost of ownership. So one other thing that we have done is if you look at, I mean, little way ahead of its times, maybe a couple of years ago, I think we are the first in the country to implement a highly secured, high performance 100G cloud, which means the cloud is running on a 100G network, spine leaf architecture. We have actually worked very closely with Intel on this when we were initially charting this out and in the initial design stages and when we implemented. So highly secure, highly scalable, overall total lower cost of ownership. I think so. This is one of the main things, I think for any cloud, when especially when companies are looking at this, is one of the main important things. In addition to that, if you look at this cloud, the entire architecture and the entire infrastructure is sitting on a tier 4 uptime certified data center, which is fully automated, 100% automated, and run pretty much on its own without any manual human intervention. So combined the quality, scale, and the total cost of ownership running on a tier 4 data center, and especially with support from Intel, I think it's been a great journey, and I think that's how we have differentiated ourselves. And if you talk to the people in the industry today, apart from other things, I mean, one of the main things that come across is the quality.
Yeah. So those are some interesting points you highlighted. If you would, if you had to really suggest someone that the choices between public cloud, private cloud, or a hybrid cloud, so it's a very confusing decision for a lot of enterprises. So what would be your suggestion? Like, how do you select which cloud to go for, and what is suitable for whom?
See, all said and done today, cloud is the way to go. For example, and it becomes actually at a point, it becomes a differentiator for companies to differentiate in their business and speed at which they run their business. So one, obviously, cloud is the way to go. Second is, like you mentioned, yes, what do I do, right? You have private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud. What do I choose from? So today we are living in an environment where you have, depending on your business, and this is also from Pi, what we tell our clients, our potential clients is, there is no one size that fits all. It's very different. For some companies, depending on their business, maybe the private cloud is the right choice. In some cases, it could be a public cloud. In some cases, it's a hybrid cloud. And depending on the nature of your business and the kind of applications that you run, like for example, if you run more cloud native apps, then you have one kind of a strategy. But you run traditional ERP kind of applications, you have one kind of strategy. But then in today's world, you have, different, you have to go with a mix of these things, because you obviously have some of these new generation applications that are running with you, and you also have the traditional set of applications that you are running with you. So in most cases, you probably will end up in some sort of a hybrid kind of a solution. But the most important thing is, when you're choosing, you have to be slightly oriented to one of these kind of things. And then let's say you are heavy on the private cloud of it because you have more traditional, heavier kind of workloads. You might choose a private cloud kind of environment with certain applications running on your public cloud. So in that kind of a scenario, it becomes a hybrid kind of an environment. So to me, there is no one size that fits all. It's very important. What's very important is the design, and when you're ready for your cloud journey, what's important is to actually very consciously make a decision what your business objectives are, and based on that, you derive or arrive on a basically a combination of the solution. And that's why it's very important to choose the right partner, especially in your cloud journey, the right cloud service provider who doesn't just give an infra for you to sit and run the environment, but also sit with you and travels through this journey, especially from day one in coming up with that tailored solution for your particular business, and then put it on the cloud.
I think that's an important point, because it shouldn't be a very haphazard decision. It's going to be a long-term decision for any enterprise, so they need to take all these points into consideration. Saumer, based on what Kalyan just talked about, could you talk a little about what Intel's role has been in building technology product ecosystem for driving cloud adoption?
Yeah, so we as Intel consider ourselves as kind of one of the pioneering catalysts for accelerating this cloud journey. And we can see that from some of our revenue, the way we look at it, right? If you look at today, Intel's data-centric revenue is close to plus minus 50%, over the last couple of quarters, and within that, cloud contributes a significant portion, probably not of 50% of that, right? So being a pioneer comes with its, with its own responsibility. And when we talk of what we do, I would kind of classify this in three parts, right? One, surely the technology and products we talk about, right? Which I will go to a little bit of more detail on. The second thing we need to understand is there's a lot of architectural discussions or changes that need to happen. I kind of referred a little bit to it when I talked about, hey, now it's moving to the edge. It requires a different kind of reference, different kind of architecture, what have you. Intel plays a leading role along with its partners in that conversation as well. The third piece of that, of course, comes in with respect to the ecosystem, which you kind of mentioned. We have a cloud builders program, which we also kind of bring in our partners to go and work with various kind of solutions, ISVs, SIs, or what have you, right? Beyond that, if you really start looking at it in the ecosystem conversation, you also start bringing in. We by the way, historically have been a big proponent of open source and OpenStack, and Kalyan and PyDC has been Pi Data Center has been a very key proponent of that as well, right? So we bring in frameworks in part of those architecture and ecosystem, and we have a few frameworks like when you talk about OpenVINO, right? It's about virtual inferencing and neural optimization. I talked about edge, and I talked about network. So think about open network, edge software services, one more framework, right? There are view usages on Visual Cloud, so you're having a framework. So think about ecosystem and architecture along with the context of frameworks, what we do. Coming specifically to technology, right? There's now when you look at technology, Varun, you have to essentially also think about the customer journey of how they go to the cloud journey, okay? We really look at a cloud journey, in fact, in three phases. Somebody who is like, hey, I want to be in the cloud, right? So typically the way you see it, that organization probably is looking at a single cloud vendor, yeah, or maybe using a second vendor more from a migration perspective. Then you see somebody who is really moving in to the phase two, which we call, right, where you are actually using multiple clouds, but interoperability of any application on those is not seamless, okay? And then you can think about a phase three, okay, where people are using are able to move their applications across multiple clouds very seamlessly. But technology implications can be, tuned based to that phase. Let's start, right? We talk about processors. I don't want to wear the audience down with what we do with Xeons, okay? But we are building capabilities and customized platforms around Xeons for specific, customers in the horizon they are in. I'll talk about a couple of interesting technologies to address. Some of you may know about what we call as software guarded extensions, okay? We have worked that with Microsoft Azure because one of the concerns you really want to bring about when you're talking about cloud is a function of security. What software guarded extension does is it creates a secure enclave for data and application code, which protects it from any kind of malware or what have you, right? So end of the day, when you're talking about technology that enables better, a guard against potentially cybercrime and better uptime, right? We also run about technologies which gives you like trusted execution technology. Why is it important? Trusted execution technology helps you in your, one of the things that, when you started up with data localization, yeah? Because you need to be able to physically attach the server where your instance is located, and trusted execution technology does that. So think about our core components where we talked about, memory and products, compute storage, and if I can say network for connectivity, right? Then I talked about a couple of instances in between, and then I also talked about some of those software stack. So think about in the horizon of what Intel is doing with respect to introducing technology to help customers expect. And very simple one, keep three things in mind. What measures the end of the day the customer is uptime, data sovereignty, security, and finally cost, as Kalyan mentioned. So we can go an hour about what we do in each of these, but those are what you're trying to address, and I gave you some examples of that.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, we are talking to Intel, and a lot of people would expect talking about chipsets and hardware, but there's so much of the software layer that people don't often talk about, and people are often not even aware about. So interesting that you brought that up. Kalyan, when it comes to migrating to cloud, Saumer put some points across, but what would your suggestions be in terms of the best practices? Because if it's a hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud, what kind of strategies would you suggest companies to have?
So I think, see, the cloud journey should be done for a purpose and not just for the sake of doing it, right? When as a CIO, for example, or a head of your IT organization, when you're proposing this journey, when you want to migrate to cloud, first, I mean, two things in my point of view. One, you need to be able to convince your CFO, who actually will write you the check, to be able to show the cost savings, number one. Number two, you need to be able to convince your CEO and the board that these are the efficiencies that you're going to bring in the future as part of running your business. This is how it's going to enhance your business. And then this is how it's going to optimize our overall cost in today's world. So these two are, I think, very, very important. Now coming down a little below that, right? So a few other things that needs to be kept in mind is you have your legacy environment, your as-is environment, and you're moving to the cloud, which is a 2D environment. You need to be able to look at the portability. You need to look at the portability. How do you migrate it? What are the costs involved? As part of it, also something that needs to be clearly identified is, are you basically cornering yourself into a place where it becomes very difficult for you to move in the future, which means that for future enhancements, for future scale, whatever to be architecture that you're going to come up with and on cloud, you need to be very clear that you have a clear path to run, because once that's the whole reason, right? You are moving to the cloud is so that you are flexible, agile, scalable, and all of that. And here, the most important thing is be in control, right? Let you yourself be in control versus somebody else or a cloud service provider controlling your environment. Basically, overall business enhancement, I mean, as part of this as-is move to be onto the cloud, it should enhance your business. It should enable your business to run faster, which means some of the applications, the way they run today, needs to be looked at, number one, so that there is an enhanced experience for your end users or your customers. Number two, overall cost optimization so that your CFO is happy. Third, for your future growth and as well as your future scale, make sure that you're not cornering yourself into a place where it's very difficult to expand or move and also control the cost. Always you need to be in control of your architecture, and always need to be control of your own cost. So that way, you know, okay, this is my upfront cost and this is my next 5-year cost. So that way you are always in control of your budget.
So on that note, let's actually take a poll from the audience and understand, what are their views about the importance of cloud. Can we have the poll question, please? So here's a quick poll. So what does your organization view as the most important benefit of cloud computing? Is it A, cost saving on hardware, software, and IT operations staff? Is it B, ability to rapidly launch new services and products? Is it C, ability to grow and shrink IT capacity on demand? Or is it D, enabling your employees to work from home seamlessly? We keep this for another 20-25 seconds to give everyone enough time to poll. Meanwhile, Saumer, what is your view? I mean, which of the 4 options do you think are the most important?
I think it's all 4, because I think honestly. Sorry, Kalyan, go ahead.
No, sorry. I said that's what I thought. So I just guessed your answer. Go ahead.
So again, important to understand, right? I think Kalyan articulated a little bit of it in the previous question.
Right.
When you're talking about a cloud journey, you start with probably your application discussion, right? And depending on where you are in your organizational maturity, some of applications could require, resizing, some could require replatforming, some could be rewriting, and that's where you start. And when you do that decision, I think there are 4 vectors that plays in. Okay, one is Kalyan mentioned economics, which is the budget. Yeah. The second, I think, is the technology availability, because a lot of time what happens for us is, we deal with something called a technology debt, as I call it, right? What is debt? Because today, thanks to virtualization, it's so separate. We'll go a little bit more, but think about technology debt, think about security, and think about what you need to provide to your customers.
I think we were getting the results. Yeah, we are just getting the results from the poll. Yeah, so well, all are important, but when it comes to choosing one, we see that cost saving and ability to rapidly launch new products and services come out to be the top, followed by ability to grow and shrink IT capacity, and which is also important, but last in the order is enabling your employees to work from home seamlessly. Yes, Amir, you were saying something.
So what I was getting at is the 4 vectors really to consider, right? One is, and some of it Kalyan articulated, one is the budget, which comes to your cost question. One is, I was talking about technical debt. Thanks to virtualization, today the lifespan of how people purchase software and do software refreshes versus how they do hardware are not necessarily connected. So a lot of time you have a discontinuity between the two, where it leads in that situation becomes that you open up your software and your overall system to vulnerability, right? So when you are talking about something new, you really need to be really looking at. Think about mainframes. I mean, there are still organizations using mainframe. Do you think that's a necessity? I have my point of view. Probably there's a lot of legacy and concern about security. Okay. And third, I think also he kind of mentioned there's a security element where all of us talked about. And finally, we should be very clear. Just because cloud is the in thing potentially doesn't mean everybody has to be a 5.9 SLA. Some application could require 5.9 SLA. Some could require a 4.9. Some could just do with something very ordinary beyond that. So bring the SLA into the conversation. And Kalyan, I think, articulated right. All those 4 vectors for an organization is unique, and we need to work through that.
Yeah, I think if everything goes for 5 nines, you'll end up overshooting your budget so much that you'll blame cloud for everything. So it's an important point that you pointed out, that you need to tier your applications. But if we look at the overall sectors adopting cloud, and within an organization, different verticals, what specific segments are you seeing where there's rapid adoption for cloud?
Yeah, so Varun, I'll take that, and Kalyan, you may add in, right? I'll
Okay.
answer the questions. Yeah, Kalyan, go ahead, please, and I can chime in.
So yeah, I mean it's fine. So I think today, right? I don't see cloud is industry agnostic. To be honest, today, data is the new oil. It's the new economy, and everybody has data. And data, you use data to make decisions real time, and you need to make these decisions fast than before. And as you are making these decisions on the fly, and as your business is scaling on the fly, actually we have seen companies scaling on the fly. We have seen companies scaling, every day, every week. In this kind of a scenario, I think cloud plays a very, very central role, and be it BFSI or education, healthcare, manufacturing. We have seen during the COVID how education industry has just transformed. I mean, actually, to a point where it's even calling the brick and mortar schools it has really put things in question. Really, do you need a brick and mortar school? Right? I mean, back to basics, like homeschooling kind of a thing, where people used to do, centuries ago. So I think it's probably with the help of technology, right? The only difference is with the help of technology. So to me, I think every single vertical today, cloud plays a very, very important role. The only difference is the scale. And I think to Saumer's point, not every industry doesn't require 5 nines, right? Maybe somebody requires maybe 3 nines and somebody requires 5 nines. So that's the only difference. The SLAs are the only difference. Like in something like a BFSI compared to an education, your SLAs could be different, right? I mean, in banking or in e-commerce, you probably cannot afford even a minute of a downtime. I mean, even a few seconds could, potentially cause millions of lost revenues, right? Potential revenues. But something in an education or something which is a little bit more ad hoc or offline, while I'm not saying disruption is okay, but maybe a slightly lower SLA is okay. So that's the difference. But I think at the end of the day, I think cloud is central to any business today, small, big, medium.
Absolutely. Saumer?
So I think Kalyan articulated a pre-COVID and post-COVID conversation, right? So I think one dimension to look at is also the workloads. Okay, so if you see the post-COVID workloads, some of the biggest workloads that's getting attention is audio video conferencing, collaboration, right? Learning from home, remote workforce management that was in a quiz a little bit earlier, right? Artificial intelligence. If you really look at the workloads we are talking about, or VDI, right? Virtual desktop interface, if you look at all those 5-6 workloads, they're very, very amenable to the cloud, right? So I think that's one piece of it. Historically, in the pre-COVID era, at least in the context of India, we saw organizations probably like in the e-commerce space, maybe BFSI space, maybe in the manufacturing space, probably leading some of his other verticals beyond. Like for example, if I take in healthcare or a government or education, right? And education, as you know, there's a lot of government in this education, right? They were probably lagging in this conversation in the pre-COVID era, but post-COVID, if you look at some of the workflows I just talked about, I think there's the gradation of where they are in the cloud journey, but everybody is understanding or moving to the cloud. It'll be a function of, as Kalyan said, which SLA we go for depending on the workload and depending on the kind of organization you're talking about.
Great. I had one technical question, Kalyan, if you could answer that. So how do you think containers can really be applied in the cloud scenario and in the improvement of consistency in cloud storage and improving efficiency of a user's operational activities?
Yeah, so I think that's containers has been, I think last year, 2 years has been a relatively new technology. It has its own advantages and disadvantages. I mean, especially used in the right context, it is phenomenal. Especially we're one of the early adopters of containers in the country a couple of years ago, where we implemented Kubernetes, for example, on a bare metal and different flavors of Kubernetes actually. But the point being, I think coming to containers, right? If you are looking for scalability, right? Quick scale and with scale and using containers on top of it, it can use fewer system resources, and which actually contributes to savings in total cost of ownership. But it's very important that you consider containers only when you're considering scale, huge scale, where you have number of transactions, a number of applications running. Portability and everything becomes very, very easy. It's good for cloud native applications. But equally, if you do not strategize your container strategy correctly, you might end up in issues also, because there are still a lot of traditional legacy or even ERP kind of applications. Even in the modern ERP kind of applications are not not fully meant for containers. So you have to be very careful in its use. In that aspect, actually, it could become counterproductive, and it could become costlier actually, because if it's not done right, it could actually be counterproductive and add more cost for your infrastructure. But especially for your applications that are more cloud native, more next generation applications, and you're looking for scale, definitely containers is the way to go. And one is it brings in quick time to market, especially as you're expanding, and it brings in cost savings as well. And it has better performance, especially for applications that need to run on scale.
So better performance, but applicable for very specific use cases.
Yes.
Right. Saumer, if you could highlight what are the new technologies we could expect coming up from Intel in the cloud arena?
I'll only share what's public, but or what has been said out there. But I would like to draw the attention back to where I started. If you really look at the cloud journey, there are three phases, right? Phase one is, hey, I want to be in the cloud, right? So it could be a one cloud or at most second for transition. The second piece is really about, I really actually use multiple clouds, okay? And the final piece is, as I said, you're looking at interoperability or seamlessness across multiple clouds for one application. So when you look at technology, it differs by the problem statement in all three. Okay, so if you're really looking at a first generation of, if I can call it Horizon 1 for simplicity, as I said, we're coming up with data center persistent memory, correct? What does it do for databases like MySQL? Okay, it reduces CPU utilization by 50%. It can go up to more than close to 3x increase in transactions per second. So when a customer is moving that journey, they're really looking at cost, right? And saying, hey, am I getting benefit by moving from CapEx to OpEx, right? So those kind of capabilities, by having specific capabilities in Xeon, having things like BCPMM actually helps make the journey or transition simpler. It gets a little bit more complex when you move to phase two, because now you're talking about multiple clouds. I'll re-emphasize what I said. When you're looking into multiple clouds, some of the issues that stand out is uptime and data sovereignty. Okay, two of the biggest things that people talk about. Now start talking about uptime. You know what is the biggest risk for uptime? Cybercrime. Okay, 6 trillion. The exposure through cybercrime for 2021 is predicted to be about 6 trillion globally. Okay, so when people are moving from 1 to 2, that's their biggest concern. How does Intel address that? I touched upon how we are working with Microsoft with the software guarded extension or SGX, what have you. We have something which we call as run sure technology. Okay, it increases resilience in the system. It creates fault tolerance so they can identify and look at what it needs to happen, right? We have something called trusted execution technology, right, which I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. It's about that data localization or geo sovereignty that we talked about. We also introduced in some of our products on telemetry. When you're using telemetry, you are able to look at what's available and ultimately get to your customer the ability of usage of data, where the potential issues could lie, how we could add them. Again, that's phase two. We're looking to a multi-cloud. Now, the Nirvana, which is Horizon 3, is about saying, hey, I'm looking at something that could work seamlessly across multiple clouds. Okay, the complexity. If you go into, I talked about this enterprise strategy group study, right? They believe that they can save up to 70 hours plus of person hours if they are able to get these processes done. So what comes up, and Kalyan, you touched upon it earlier, right? There are things like governance, okay? and policies that we look at there, right? So when we look at those issues, we are introducing something very interesting. I don't know if you people have heard of something called note feature discovery. Intel has a capability called note feature discovery. When applications are getting written, you are able to get, upstream your hardware and software capabilities, so they can then make sure that whatever workloads you're running on is using the best capabilities of the platform offers. You can see the specifications being written for something called, CXL, which is Compute Express Link. Okay, it has players like Alibaba, Cisco, Dell, all as part of an ecosystem. What you're trying to do, this is a phenomenally different interconnect technology, because now you're not going to talk about CPU only. You have CPU, you have fabric, you have accelerator, multiple components. How do we make sure there's high density and high speed interconnect that can work between the two? So in phase 3, we are starting to move on some of those elements, right, where we're bringing in technology at the at the physical level to increase the speed and access, increase the security. At the same time, I also talked about frameworks like One API, oneness, OpenVINO, because that's the moment you are, there's an orchestration that needs to happen. So think about technology in those 3 phases based on where you are. Probably if in phase 1, you can go with what the classical Xeon and memory storages offer. Phase 2, look at how we can do for security, data sovereignty, uptime. Phase 3, management complexity. Be aware of things like CXL, One API, oneness, and some of the frameworks we're talking about. And of course, all of us is open source driven and ecosystem driven. This is not something that we're trying to do in isolation.
I think those are some interesting technologies, and honestly, I wasn't aware of some part of it. So I'll have to go back and read more about it. It would be great to learn more. Kalyan, Saumer talked about data localization issues. Since you interact with a lot of customers looking to localize data, is there a concern from users about cloud and data localizations, in the sense sometimes when the data is in your data center, you have the sense of control, but when it's in cloud, some people might not get that sense. So does cloud really help in enabling data localization, or is it the other way around?
No, actually, I'm one of those people who believe in, and we at Pi strongly believe that cloud is the way to go for data localization. And not only that, but you can do it quicker, you can do it faster. And the reason I'll tell you why that is because, for example, we have helped some customers with their data localization needs. And especially when you're doing that, there are certain policies, there are certain guidelines, there are certain jurisdiction rules, and there are certain certifications, etc., that you need to be able to do as an organization. So when you're, for example, if you are doing this in isolation on your own premise as an organization, you have to do all of these things, and you have to be on top of it. You have to do regular audits. And it becomes very, very, in some cases, you need to submit reports to the governing bodies like RBI, etc. So it becomes very, it's a lot of overhead. So now what happens is when you move to the cloud, a cloud player like Pi, we already do this. So this is our job. This is our bread and butter. We enable this for not just one customer, for a number of them. So when you are moving to cloud, will automatically check all these boxes and ensure the compliances, and you are running within a framework that is already adhering to the data localization. So it doesn't not only help you comply, but it complies faster and with a lower cost, because we already have all those certifications. Our infrastructure is already certified. Our cloud platform is already, and those policies, everything is already being taken care of. So to me, I think definitely cloud is a way to go, and you can do it faster.
Thanks for breaking that myth for us. Let's actually take another poll. Let's try and understand what kind of applications people are really putting on cloud. Can we have the next poll, please? So this is a multiple choice poll, as in you can select multiple options. The question is, for which type of applications do you use or plan to deploy into cloud within the next 12 months? Is it for development, testing, QA, or staging? Are you looking at cloud for production and enterprise applications? Are you deploying office productivity applications on cloud, or you're not moving to cloud at all? So, Saumer, out of these, which ones are the most popular ones to move to the cloud, in your opinion?
So Varun, I will address this as a trick question, okay? Because it is a trick question, okay? Because see, if you and let me answer this in the context of India, okay? I think in India, cloud has reached critical mass, okay? So when you look at an organization's cloud journey, they consider cloud, they start doing some dev, test, Q&A, then they move into those peripheral apps that you have, and then finally go into the core apps like payroll and all that we're talking about. If you look at India, by the way, we at least I think have 40% plus in the last two phases. Okay, so because which is essentially a production level apps and then actually mission critical apps. So that is also an indication that as a country we are moving faster, and with COVID we expect this to move faster than what it was probably pre-COVID. I hope I addressed what.
No, that's actually a point that we've seen from a lot of players. We were talking to CIOs, and they say that they had planned several cloud applications, and the deployment time was for next 2 years. And what they've done in last 2 months is actually more than what they had planned for the next 2 years. So the deployment rate has been a lot faster rather than slowing down. So let's actually see what the results say. Can you have the results, please? So development testing seems to be most popular, followed by production and enterprise applications. See, this is an interesting point. People are actually increasingly looking at cloud for production and enterprise applications, which was quite not the case in the past. People were very hesitant, but clearly that hesitance is going away now.
Actually, Varun, if I may add here, if you look at the stats here, not moving to cloud is only 6%, which means the rest of the 94% are moving to cloud. So that's a very strong stat, I think, if you will, in this.
Totally. I mean, this would be, I think, first poll of its kind where we see so many people actually either already moved to cloud or planning to move in a big way.
Yeah.
So, Saumer, how do you think businesses can actually create a successful cloud migration plan? If you could also touch upon the operation driver of successful migration.
Sure. I think we kind of touched a little bit about it, and Kalyan spoke about it. If you really look at, you have to look at, in my view, about 4 to 5 drivers of this, right? Start with the application, okay? When you look at the workloads that needs to be driven, you will probably land up with somewhere between something that has to be retained, somewhere it has to be repartitioned, sometimes it has to be re-platformed. That's when you start talking about moving to the next level of the cloud, right? The second thing is also, I highlighted a term called technical debt, right? The question is, in your organization, where has been the gap been between, your life cycle for your software and your life cycle for your hardware, and where are the gaps that you see that is creating risk, so that you're able to do a constant alignment of how you decide how you're going to migrate, right? And if at all you need to migrate. The third piece I would really bring about is budget, right? One of the biggest reasons people think that they want to move to cloud is saying, hey, it's price flexibility with OpEx. You'll be surprised to know that given that the cloud providers move so fast, organizations probably deal with, beyond a point, it becomes, it is a task in itself to understand how price models are changing, how frequently instances are being introduced, how you re-optimize that, right? So working with, and Kalyan, I've highlighted upfront, he says, working with a budget and working with what you think is your SLAs, what you achieve, is, I think, equally important. So that's, to me, is 3, right? What's your budget? What do you want to achieve, right? That will define where we go back, right? The fourth piece of this conversations becomes governance, right? Because when you move, by the way, we also be very clear, cloud is not an end state. Cloud is an operational procedure to a targeted end state, okay? So you have to go to this iterative model of analyzing, designing, this is for migration, this is for in-house, what have you, see what outcomes you be, and come back. So a governance and policy procedure probably is a fourth vector I call. Last but not the least, end of the day, all of us should aspire to be in the third horizon of the cloud I talked about, which is about interoperability across multiple clouds. That requires agility, okay? That requires flexibility. So pre-investments in tools and processes to make sure that you're going toward a journey should be in your mind all the time, even when you are in the first phase of this discussion, right? So just I'll rehash again, think about your application, think about your budget constraint, think about your technology debt or gaps that I talked about, think about your governance, and finally, please do not compromise on the tools and processes because you have to move with multi-cloud as your end state or end goal.
Just one thing, Varun, I want to add there to what Saumer said. I think just one thing is, in addition to that, is being able to handle the change. I mean, we all know in organizations there's always a fear of change, right? So there's always this, oh, you're so comfortable in your current environment, you just don't want to move, and it's a human, tendency. Always, we have seen this time and again. So I think the only way to deal that is to basically clearly lay out the plan, break down the overall plan into individual targets and milestones, and actually that way you are not only meeting your company's business objectives, but also making sure that your current team is transitioning from a legacy kind of an environment to a cloud kind of an environment. So it's very important that you transition your people through this. Otherwise, there is always this, because we know the success and failure ends with people at the end of the day.
Totally. So we're actually getting a lot of questions from the audience. One question is pretty fundamental that I can see here. So Kalyan, maybe you could take this. So the question is, keeping in view of the poor power supply reliability and poor supply of internet in many areas, how do you see cloud solutions getting to areas where connectivity is a big challenge?
Fantastic question. I think, see, today, India is far better than what it was even a few years ago. There are, significant amount of billions of dollars of fiber investments that went into the country, and the testimony for that is the recent OTT explosion and the entertainment, where people are able to, watch from their home, comfort of their own home, playing movies, etc., and even in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So that is a clear testimony of that India has moved far beyond that bottleneck of not being able to only bandwidth is limited to certain areas in the country. So that, to me, I think is still a myth. But of course, I'm not saying that it's completely solved, but to a large extent it is solved. And the most important thing is, like, for example, if you take Pi, the poor power availability, yes, India has a huge challenge, and I think that's the reason why when you choose your data center and cloud service provider, you need to make sure that it has quality power. One is not just quality; the cost also is a problem. Again, I keep going to cost because it's a very important part of this whole cloud discussion, right? So it's very, very important. The quality of power, the cost of power, and that's the reason why when Pi chooses its locations to build these large-scale data centers, it pays utmost attention to these things, and that's why it starts and ends with quality, because high quality of power, low cost of power, and then also the bandwidth. So, for example, when we choose our locations, again, our data centers are located right next to the trunk lines of the fiber, where the country is connected end to end. So that way you get the best of the best latency, not just within the country, but also internationally. So it's very important when you choose especially your outsourcing to a third-party data center player, be it for your co-location data center kind of a business or even cloud. It's very important you choose these locations very carefully to deal with these quality issues when it comes to power and bandwidth. Number one. Number two, and the other way to also overcome is you also make sure that the data center that you're going with have all the service providers available to who is providing the bandwidth to your data center. So in our case, for example, we have 3 backups, and all of them are in a ring fashion. So you have redundancies built in to be able to take care of all of these fiber related issues. But on top, I mean, to begin with itself, I think the quality of the fiber, especially in our locations, is fantastic, is one of its kind. So that's how you address some of these issues. But I think India is moving way beyond where we are. Oh, one more point there. So sorry, Varun. One more point there is, especially when it comes to natural disasters, including pandemics and other things. It's very important that when there is a huge cyclone or a flood or even a pandemic like COVID, you need to make sure that you are partnering with a service provider who is capable of seamlessly handling these kind of situations, so that you're not cornering yourself or caught up in a situation like this.
So there's a related question. Maybe Saumer would also want to respond to this. So the question is, what should be the criteria for assessment of cloud players? So the gentleman also has asked whether is it about uptime, security, and cost, or is it more than that?
I think great point brought up by Kalyan. If you really look at if you really read the fine print about services that even the biggest players provide, the pricing differs by location and service. Okay, a lot of time people lose that conversation, but I think it genuinely comes down to the organization you were talking about. Okay, and where that organization is in the cloud journey. As I said, if an organization is looking to say, hey, I'm completely on-prem, I'm all legacy. By the way, as I said, cloud is an operational model. Sometimes you could first go with defining a private cloud for your organization and move it to an agile infrastructure of providing services to your department. A lot of digital natives do that, by the way, right? If you are in that phase, I think the first conversation, as the gentleman pointed out, is really about cost, okay, and uptime. If you go from the first time, right? When you move into phase two, which is where you're saying, okay, now I need multiple clouds. I may have some in-house, I may have some on a public cloud, some on a private, what have you. You start talking about the security issues because there are interoperability issues that come up, right? You're also talking about optimization issues, which again goes back to a little bit of your call, but optimization brings an efficiency, okay? That's kind of phase two. And if you really look at India, most of the organizations probably fit between the phase one and phase two. But as I said, if somebody is in the phase three of the conversation where you're talking about interoperability across multiple clouds, okay, then you start talking about things like saying, what orchestration am I going to use, right? What framework am I going to use to be able to make sure that I'm not investing a lot of my, special or critical IT management resources looking at system management tasks, right? Can I reduce, if I am doing this interoperability or orchestration, am I able to reduce my exposure to security and crime? So please first evaluate where we are in the journey, as I said, in the 3 phases, and customize the ask or focus based on that. And it's always an individual organization discussion.
So Saumer, there's another question especially for you. The question is about how is Intel really helping in rapid recovery, resilience, and regulatory compliance and security? How is Intel really helping customers in these aspects?
So see, when we look at this conversations, Varun, for Intel, being an enabler, we start really talking in terms of what technologies we provide, right? When you brought about resilience, I touched upon a few of those, right? I talked about run sure technology, okay? This is something that we work with some of our leading service providers to make sure that they use this technology to be able to make sure that their systems and their memory are both resilient and can predict failures versus what you do in a normal scenario, okay? I also talked about the usage of telemetry, but then it's not something that Intel does in isolation. Intel has to do with its partner, right? I also talked about security in that conversation. There was a specific question on data sovereignty, right? What you do on data sovereignty and geolocation, I talked about trusted execution technology. With trusted execution technology, as long as our cloud service provider partner is able to work with us, we are able to physically attest the physical location of where this instance is located. But again, I keep repeating that this is not an Intel isolation. We're an enabler. We work with our partners very closely to be able to enable that.
So on that note, can you talk about how are you really working with Pi Data Center, and if Kalyan, you could also talk about your association with Intel.
Yeah. You want me to start? So I'll
Yeah,
take that
go
first.
ahead. Yeah.
So I think we have always been working very, very closely with Intel all along. Pretty much, every quarter, our teams, our technical teams work with Intel. Any new release, even every new processor that comes out, we actually, ahead of before even it's released into the market, we get an opportunity. Actually, Intel helps us in this, in providing this opportunity to be able to test some of the workloads early on their architecture. And as I said, when we built our, the 100G, OpenStack based cloud platform, we worked very closely with them. They've shared, some of their learnings internal to, obviously they have access to global learnings across the world, and some of those experiences were definitely helpful for us. And for example, today as we speak, we are working on for a couple of customers on being able to introduce Intel's Optane memory. So that's a very recent thing, and I'm personally very excited about to see how it goes. And actually, as a concept, it's fantastic because today, we have seen a lot of scenarios where you run out of, you actually, you need a lot of memory, but you don't need a lot of compute capacity from a processing standpoint, and then there is a bit of a wastage there. So I think what I'm actually eagerly looking forward to is the introduction of Optane memory. I think it will bring in those more efficiencies from a processing power standpoint as well. So things like this, we work very closely with Intel. So
Saumer, before you answer that question, could you elaborate a bit on the Optane technology? It would be interesting for everyone to know what it's about.
See, I can go on for days on this, but what we call Kalyan referred. Kalyan talked about. Yeah, Kalyan talked about typically what we call as Optane DC persistent memory, right? If you really look at the memory hierarchy, you kind of have DRAM. Today's world, you have those SSD and NVMe drives, and then you get into your big storage or a hard disk drive, right? So what really DCPMM tries to do is kind of fill in a gap between your DRAM versus your SSD, so that you get persistence. You really get a lower cost, at the same time give the persistence and expectation that the customer is looking for. I'll give one of the biggest workloads that we see where customers are increasingly looking at from a cloud or adoption of cloud perspective is SAP HANA, right? If you really look at SAP HANA, okay, I'll give you a couple of statistics that should kind of amplify what this DCPMM can do, okay? So when you're talking about SAP HANA, if you take a 6 terabyte database, okay, and you want to do a boot up on that, on a traditional 6 terabyte database with DRAM, today it would take you about 50 minutes for a 6 terabyte database. If you use the right convergence between DRAM and DCPMM, that would take 4 minutes. Okay, so you have a reduction of 12.5 times using just DCPMM. And as I said, I can go on and on, but I think that's because it's a very prevalent workload in the cloud, something that probably a lot of the audience may be working on, something to understand. That please go and ask that conversation. It gives you that the performance to price benefit that we are talking about from a TCO perspective. That is my small plug on DCPMM.
No, I think from a technology perspective, it's important to know what's going on in the tech arena to get the right product across. So we were talking also about your association with Pi Data Center and how, from your end, what kind of collaboration you're doing.
So, Kalyan, I think touched upon a few. When we look at, any partner, and PyDC being one of the premier partners we work with, right? As step one, we look at a technology conversation. A lot of this conversation gets very customized, right? If it's not very cookie cutter that you can just take an off-the-shelf product and do it. So availability of technology and availability of resources to go and help support a partner to do that is kind of step one. And Kalyan talked about that, right? The second piece, what we talked about is depending on when you're launching new services, like we talked about containers a little bit, right? We help them in that. For example, I remember I talked about this node feature discovery as a capability. The container as a service has a great linkage, and I don't want to name partners who are already using it, but it's a great linkage back into how you can use the the upstream capabilities of the hardware and software to optimize your containers and your performance in that conversation, right? So we work on that technical collaboration too. Going to the extent, in some cases, we may define specific custom products for a particular service provider. And last but not the least, whether it's business model or ecosystem participation or scaling, downstream go-to-market, we work with them too. Okay, so think about technical collaboration where it could even be designing of data centers. Think about services and application. Think about downstream go-to-market, because we believe that our partner success is our success, and we actually believe in that motto that we go with.
Absolutely, it's a win-win situation for you, for the partners, and eventually for the customers as well. So with that, we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Kalyan. Thanks, Saumer, for taking time out. I would like to thank all our attendees for taking time out to attend this discussion. I hope it was a valuable discussion and had enough to take back with you. So thank you so much for joining in. Stay tuned for more such sessions and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Varun, Saumer. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kalyan.